Hi everyone, this is Alicia Panzarella here, and I am going to be reporting on the formative assessment tool that I have most gravitated towards pretty much since the very beginning of our class time together, and that has been Google Forms or using a Google form in my physics courses. So I predominantly use these in my college prep physics class and then in my honors physics class as well. So we always look at, the why behind why something has happened, why we choose to do something. And that's the driving question in my physics course. So I wanted to make that kind of the driving question of, why did I choose to do this and have the kind of that as my overarching theme here. So ultimately, why I chose Google Forms, and especially, opposed to other formative assessment tools that we could have chosen from. I did choose forms, but ultimately the goal, regardless of what I would have chosen, would have been the same because the goal of formative assessment is to collect data that is actionable and is timely. If the tool that you're using can't do both of those things, then you shouldn't be using that tool because the first thing, it has to be actionable either on your part, the student's part, or both. And I will say now, especially given that I teach predominantly seniors, they're 17, 18 years old, I put more on them to be able to take the feedback that they're given from the formative assessment, however that feedback comes, and then be able to say, okay, and reflect and say, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to chip away at whatever mistakes I have, whatever misconceptions I have, and get to that mastery. So I lean more towards that. But on my end, I need to be able to give them the resources that they need to say, okay, if I need to do this, this, and this, here's what I need to do. Here's the resources she's given me. Here's the options that she's given me. So I need to have that so that they could actually act on it. And then obviously there are times where I have to say, okay, well, what do I need to change up for tomorrow or the lesson as a whole based off of this formative assessment? And generally, it's small tweaks at this point that I have to make, but they are obviously there to make based on the formative assessment. And then the other piece to that is it has to be timely. If you're giving a formative assessment and it can't be then implemented, the results can't be implemented then the next day or that night, or even 2 days from then, if we really got to push it, if you can't do it in a very short time frame, then there's really no point in using that tool because it's not doing anything to drive the instruction or drive the student's mastery of the content. So it has to have those two things. So that's why I have really gravitated towards the Google Forms because it is instant data collection for me, instant feedback for the students, kind of depending on how I give it. And then it allows me, because it is instant, to make that actionable plan either that night, the next day, or whatever it happens to be, for the lesson or the unit as a whole. So this was just the tool that I have found to be most effective in order to achieve those two goals. So that's what I said, my first thing. I really appreciate the graphical analysis portion of Google Forms. I can look at a chart very quickly because it's mostly the pie graphs that I see, and I can make adjustments from there as I need. Same thing, it provides immediate feedback to the student. If you are using it as a quiz, they immediately get that feedback, and I've used it in some different ways as well. But it's a great tool for reflection, and again, it's very easy to use. So some of the tools that we used, I sometimes thought were cumbersome on my part, on the student's part. So I want things to be kind of quick and efficient, especially to achieve those two goals. So again, it is easy and it is time friendly. So uh, there we go. So as far as classroom management for the forms, the biggest thing that I have to stress is that you need to take the form as something that is important. Because again, 17, 18 years old, even myself and adults, we have a tendency to view forms as, oh, this is just something I could, quickly click through, or I'm going to give my response that I'm like, oh, I know admin's never going to read these, so I'm just going to quickly go through this. And I want them to realize, at least for my class, there is a purpose, there is a reason behind why we are doing this. So I really, really, really stress. So if we're kind of looking at that second point there, I really emphasize, you are doing this for a purpose. Here's why we are doing it. Here's how it's going to help you. Here's how it's going to help me. So I really have to just emphasize the why behind why we're using the form. And then, 95% of the students take it very seriously. And it helps them and it helps me. Now, I have given some external motivation for some of them to say, listen, you're going to fill out this form, and then I'm going to have an individual meeting with all of you tomorrow based off of your answer. So we can't have that meeting unless you do that form. Or, hey, I want you to take this reflection seriously, so I am going to make it worth some summative points because I can't say that reflection is really important and then not follow through with a quantitative way to show that it's important. Now, those point values that I assign to it are not based on anything in terms of accuracy. It's just, did you respond to the prompt to the best of your ability? Did you fully dive into it? Did you answer all the questions? Things like that. So I do have to, add in a little bit of external motivation so that they do take the form seriously, because if not, then they're not getting good feedback. I'm not getting good feedback, and it doesn't actually serve a purpose then. So I wanted to just showcase 3 different ways that I have used the forms, and then I have more of these same versions, but these are the 3 kind of overarching ways that I've used it. And I kind of listed them in my favorite to least favorite. So my favorite way that I used the forms was I had the students complete some pencil paper problems that went along with our projectile motion unit. And there are 3 different scenarios. There are 0, 90, and angled problems. And I wanted them to time themselves as they did these questions. Now, this kind of appeared or was given to them at the end of a unit. And it was used as kind of the last push of, okay, based off of where you are, what do you need to do within the next couple days before you take the exam? So it provided timely feedback to them, to me, and it was still able to be actionable because there was still time to address any areas of need prior to the test. So the reason for the timing is to say, if you do a 0-degree problem and it only takes you 3 minutes to do that problem, well, that means that you've mastered that question. You've done it very quickly. You've done it without error. You've done it without resources. So that 0-degree problem is not something that you have to go back to. You don't have to study that anymore. You've mastered that. But if you did an angled problem and it took you 15 minutes and you had to use your resources and you had to ask questions, well, then that shows you haven't mastered that yet because you haven't been able to do it quickly because you haven't recognized different things within the problem. You haven't had enough practice, things like that. So there you can then focus any questions to me, any tutoring from me, any additional questions that you need to go through based off of that time data. So that was really interesting. That was super helpful for me. It was super helpful for the students. They said it really gave them a quantitative way to bring to life what they needed to work on. So this is certainly something I'm going to do again, and especially in my AP classes because we have timed exams. It's a college level course. So I want to get them kind of prepared for those expectations of, hey, you have 50 minutes to take a very long math test. What do you need to do to make sure that you're prepared for those time restraints? So this was definitely my favorite way that the form was used. And it was also a good way for me to see, where are the students kind of ranking. And as you can see, it was a very low percentage that was in the, hey, it took me a while, or, I didn't participate in this problem. So that was really great to see. Now, the second way that I really enjoyed using the Google form was from that reflection side. So for the forces unit, the students did a pre-assessment where they went through, 4 different scenarios, and they were given a variety of questions with those scenarios. And then by this one, this was at the end of the unit. There was still 2 days, I'm sorry, 3 days before they were actually going to take the test because they I think they took this on a Friday, and then like their test was either Monday or Tuesday. But there was some time for them to do this reflection to see, how did I grow over this unit? Let me analyze my original thinking, and then let me see, how far I've come. And then at the very bottom of it, I said, based off of your reflection, what pieces do you still think you need to work on? How are you going to work on them? And what do you need from me? And 98% of the responses were, I don't need anything from you. You've given me what I need. I just need to practice more. So I'm like, all right, great. Which is great that they recognized. Even one person said, like, yeah, I need to do this, but I know you put all of these options in the checklist, so I'm going to use them. Like, yes, success. So that was really great to see. So I'm going to add in those reflection pieces more. The only thing that I don't like about it in this format is I really like to be able to like write and highlight and leave comments where in a form you can't really do that. I could do it on my rubric that I gave back to them, but I would much rather like have a printed out version so that I could physically write on it and they could have my comments. So I do think that is one of the downfalls of doing it this way, rather than having them like write up their responses and then hand it to me in pencil paper or in paper form, and give those responses that way. Now, the last way that I use the forms, that I ultimately just didn't like this. It created more work for me, more confusion for the kids. It really didn't give me a whole lot of data that I was surprised about. So I gave the college prep class a conceptual ticket in the door that had a whole plethora of conceptual questions that they needed for the projectile motion unit. And this happened at the very beginning of the unit. It was like 1 or 2 days after we did the big picture. And the kids were really good about doing the form, but the problem was when I went over the answers, they didn't have their answers physically in front of them. Like, sure, like I collected decent data from this. But they didn't have their answers there. So some of them were like, oh, I don't remember what I put. Can I write this down? So what I ended up having to do is just print these questions anyways, give the questions to the students. They physically wrote their answers down. And really, we could have just skipped a step and done that from the beginning. So I did not like it from that end. The other thing is that I didn't have it as like multiple choice questions. They were all short answer. And as you can see, like this student said time, this student said the time, this student said time with a lowercase t, this student said time because. So they were all saying the same thing minus initial position and acceleration, but it was appearing as if the answers were more diverse than they were. So it kind of like skewed the data for me by not having very set answers so that I could have just used that pie chart. So it really didn't end up being that helpful. So I could change the formatting of this, but the problem was I didn't want to put a preset list of answers for them to choose from, because then I'm kind of narrowing not their reflection, but I'm kind of narrowing their answers to just what I think their answers would be, rather than having them physically write out, what they could be. Because sometimes I get answers that are in like left field, and I'm like, whoo, where'd we get that from? So we have to bring that in. But I wouldn't see those answers if I already gave them preset thoughts. So I wanted to have this as a short answer, but it just it didn't give me the feedback in terms of the graphical analysis that I wanted. I ended up having to print it anyways. So I don't think I will do it this way again because it wasn't helpful to the extent that I would have wanted it to be helpful. But maybe in the future I could still find a way to have a conceptual check-in, but have those preset answers. So in like your A, B, C, and D for your multiple choice, that still looks at misconceptions, but maybe do it like later in a unit, so I can collect data that way. I'm not sure. It's something I still need to kind of work through to make it more effective. But my first two ways that I use the form, I would definitely do that again in the future. So, thank you for watching my video. Hopefully you got some ideas. But yeah, I have thoroughly enjoyed using forms and I look forward to using them in multiple different ways in the future.